Nous vivons ça chaque jour. Par le passé, il y avait la forêt, il y avait beaucoup de forêts, donc c'était plus facile et les pluies étaient régulières. Les saisons étaient connues. On sait qu'on avait déjà 4 saisons, 2 saisons de pluie et 2 saisons sèches. Mais maintenant, on ne maîtrise plus les saisons. On ne sait pas à quel moment il faut planter et à quel moment il faut arrêter. Avec la chaleur qu'il y a eu là, en tout cas, on n'avait pas la nourriture. Dieu merci, cette année, il n'y a plus beaucoup. Il y a assez de nourriture. Mais par contre, notre production cacaoyère a baissé. La production cacaoyère a baissé à cause des maladies qui sont un peu liées à la pluie. Parce que les gens n'ont pas eu assez de récoltes, donc moins d'argent. Donc, ça veut dire que nous vivons dans le plein pied dans le changement climatique, avec ses effets négatifs sur notre environnement, notre milieu de vie, et notre économie, et notre façon de vivre. Vous voyez. Parce qu'avec même les pluies, elles sont excessives et ça détruit une partie de nos cultures. Cette année, par exemple, ceux qui ont fait le riz dans les bas-fonds, la pluie est venue et tout a été détruit. Vous voyez. Donc c'est pour dire que le changement climatique, nous le vivons. Donc il faut avoir une dose de courage pour pouvoir continuer à planter, pour pouvoir réussir la plantation. Et donc quand on parle de dose de courage, il faut être courageux, mais il faut avoir encore des ressources financières. Parce que si vous plantez que ça a échoué, il faut refaire. Et sûr qu'avec la nourriture aussi, qui va manquer à cause de la chaleur et la forte chaleur. Donc du coup, vous n'avez pas de nourriture et vous n'avez pas de ressources financières. Et pour réussir la plantation, c'est difficile. Maintenant, c'est vrai, nous sommes dans le projet Fairtrade. Et ça, le projet fait beaucoup de choses pour nous. À travers les formations. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, quelqu'un qui est formé, c'est quelqu'un qui peut décider. Vous voyez. Mais celui qui n'est pas formé, il est perdu. Donc aujourd'hui, à travers les formations que Fairtrade Africa nous fait, ça nous permet quand même de connaître un peu les maladies, de connaître un peu comment il faut améliorer la productivité. Et c'est vrai, non. Donc tout ça, quand même, c'est bon.
So, welcome everybody. Good to see you all. This is the chocolate part of the Fairtrade Connections Festival for Fairtrade Fortnight 2021. And we're very honoured to have with us David Greenwood Haigh, who is a chocolatier from Wakefield. You don't get many of them to the pound. And I'm going to hand you over to David, who's going to take us through making chocolate truffles and how to taste chocolate, which is not as simple as it sounds. If you've got any questions, bob them in the chat, and there's also a Q&A button as well that you can use, so just attract our attention that way. David, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for asking me to do this. I've probably got what many people would say is one of the best jobs in the world. I spend most of my time either teaching people to taste chocolate, showing them where it comes from, how it gets from this to, I'll do that, to this, and all the stages in between. I go to schools, I go to cities, I do team building events, which have become virtual now. I've just come back from 5 weeks in Dubai, working with corporations, doing team building. I've been working with some students teaching. I go to universities in the UK and teach taste and chocolate. And then obviously with my 11 years time at Divine, I never don't mention fair trade and trade justice, because for me it goes hand in hand. And my ultimate aim is to open another chocolate factory, because we've opened one in Sao Tome, but I want to do another one in Haiti, and then give that to a cooperative and have farmers make it themselves. But I'm a long way off that goal, but that's my aim, to add as much value in origin to cocoa farmers as I possibly can. So I don't sell chocolate, I don't make chocolate, I teach other people to make it, just so people don't ring me up and say, where can I buy your chocolate, because you can't. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to take you and show you probably the first confection, because chocolate for 3,500 years was a savoury product. It was a drink. It was something you cooked with meats and took the umami elements of it. And then once we got to the 1800s and learned how to make a chocolate bar from it, it started to change. And the first development before a chocolate bar was truffles. There's a story that goes, there's 3 different stories. This is my favourite one, so I'm going to tell it as though it's the only one, but I am aware there are others. And I believe that Albert Augustus Escoffier, who was one of the first celebrity chefs, was the guy who's attributed to discovering this dish. Like most recipes, it was an accident, it was a mistake. And the story goes that one of his stagerns, one of his apprentices, was walking across the kitchen with a bowl of hot cream, and he spilt it into a bowl of chocolate. Chocolate was the most expensive ingredient in the kitchen at the time because it was brand new and it came halfway around the world. And Escoffier screamed at the top of his voice, Gordon Ramsay style, ganache. And ganache for French speakers means you're good for nothing. It's a derogatory term that French people use amongst themselves, I hope, not to us. And he took the bowl from him, started to stir, and he noticed there was an emulsion forming in the centre of the bowl. French men pride themselves on understanding kitchen science. It's their thing. English men burn sausages and chicken legs on barbecues and carve meat, and French men do the science. So they make emulsions, they create mayonnaises. Ganache technically is a chocolate mayonnaise because it's a fat and a solid that are being and a liquid being pushed together. And these are 2 things that don't work together. They repel each other normally in use. Water and oil don't mix. So he understood what was happening in the centre of this bowl, and as he stirred and incorporated more of the liquid, more of the cream, he got this beautiful silky chocolate sauce. He could take that sauce and pour it over a poached pear, and he'd got pear belle Helene, which is one of his dishes. He could then pour it into a pastry case, and he'd got tarte au chocolat. And he could then wait for it to set, get his hands in there and form it into walnut shapes with his hand, and then dust that in cocoa powder, and it looked like a truffle. It looked like the truffe that the French would go looking for with pigs. They now use dogs because pigs won't give you the truffle back. And dogs are silly. If you pat them on the head, they'll give you the truffle. So that's why it's called a truffle, when really it's a ganache. A jewel of the forest is how Escoffier first described it. And that's what we're going to do. Very simple, hand roll, traditionally French dessert. I'm doing this vegan, not because my son's gone vegan actually, and he's sort of my size and has embraced all plants. I'm doing it this way just to demonstrate you can make it with any liquid. I've made it with gin and tonic. I've made it with beer. I've made it with cider, with fruit juices. When I was in Sao Tome recently, I made it with long life cream and ylang ylang, which is the stuff that goes into Chanel No. 5, because they grow ylang ylang there. So this is the basic thing, and then you should go and get excited and do other things. You'll have things in your cupboard, your kitchen store cupboard now, so you might not want to follow this recipe exactly. So if you want to do cream instead of the water that I'm doing, by all means do that. I'm going to go and get my boiling water, so I'm going to be away from you for 2 minutes. It won't be that because I'm going to use the kettle and I've pre-boiled it. But I'll come back with the boiling water and then we'll carry on. So in 2 seconds.
Great. So what we're going to do while David's gone, we're going to have a poll. So you should have a poll popping up in front of you now. Just a couple of fun questions while he's gone. This is great. Lots of love for the dark chocolate here. And yes, I see some of you have read all the way down to the end of the second question to see all of the above, and that seems to be the most popular answer. Excellent. Right, I'm going to end that so you can see what you've voted for. There we go. Yes, so lots of people liking dark chocolate, other people liking dark milk or milk chocolate. And then, of course, with Fairtrade, it absolutely is better for farmers and workers, the planet, and it also tastes great as well. So thanks for taking part in that. Throughout the afternoon, I've got 3 special prizes to give away. So I'm going to ask David to ask some questions on the way through, and then I can pick out some people from the chat box who answer the questions to win some prizes.
Perfect. Right. I told you that would be quick. So I'm going to take my Fairtrade light brown sugar. It's going to go into my boiling water because we want the sugar to dissolve and not have crystals in there. If you were doing this in a pan on the stove, you just wait while it's all melted, while it's all dissolved, and then once you've done that, it goes.
So, David, Karen's asking a question. Would all of the other liquids be heated as well? So obviously you've gone and boiled.
Absolutely, exactly the same method, because we need the heat to melt the chocolate, and then we're going to push them together. So you'd boil them on the stove. If you wanted to infuse this with a flavour, with vanilla or cardamom or something, then put that into the liquid first, boil the liquid, turn it off, let it sit a minimum of 20 minutes, then take whatever the thing is out, and then start again at the beginning, heat the liquid, and then we're going to pour it over the chocolate. I'll lift the bowl up. You might not see. So we've got that on there. And then we leave it just a couple of seconds because the heat will start to melt the chocolate. Chocolate starts to melt at 25 degrees and is fully liquid at 36.2, which is body temperature, which is why chocolate becomes sensual. I'm going to gently start stirring in the middle of this bowl now, and we should start quite soon to get an emulsion forming.
Just quickly, can I just say that somebody's asked the question whether we've got access to this recipe. You can download it from the Fairtrade Yorkshire's website, so I'm going to put the link in the chat box now.
Great stuff. There's also, if people want to know how to temper chocolate at home and things like that, those notes I'll make sure you've got, Joe, so you'll be able to do that as well. So we're not quite there yet. If you find at home that you've lost the temperature because your chocolate was cold, you can stick it in the microwave for 10 seconds. I wouldn't put it in for any longer than 10 seconds, but that will start to melt. If you're very clever and you've got an immersion stick blender, put that on and it'll whiz it through in seconds and you'll have a lovely smooth ganache. But I thought we'd do it the old-fashioned way. Then everybody's got a spoon, everybody's got a bowl. Oh. And occasionally I get people say I don't have a microwave, which is why I've done it using a kettle, because everybody can make a cup of tea. So now I've got that stage where we've got a lovely chocolate sauce. I don't know how close I can get to the camera to show that. I'm watching for you nodding, Joe, and then I know I've got it so you can see. This is now going to go into the fridge. You can put a piece of cling film over the top that'll stop it forming a skin. Doesn't really matter that much, but you can. So I'm just going to put this in the fridge, and this is going to take about 20 minutes in the fridge. You'll be very pleased to know I've got one I made earlier here. So whatever happens, if in 20 minutes yours isn't soft enough to mould or hasn't set enough, leave it, that's okay. And you can catch up a little bit later or do it when we've stopped this seminar and do that. But this is going to go into the fridge now. And I usually put it in Philadelphia containers or butter dishes. I keep those around because they're nice and shallow and you can do 2 or 3 and it'll kill quicker if you want to use it that day.
Leslie, you had your hand up. Is there a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, just how much liquid did he have? Because I was looking at 30 grams. Is that really the amount?
David, did you hear that question?
So, sorry, yes, I did. I'm back. There's
Yeah.
150 mils of liquid. So I've gone all metric. I know I'm old, but I decided I had to make the change and go metric.
Right.
So it's 350 grams of chocolate.
Yeah.
And 150 mils of liquid.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
30.
So now we're going to taste chocolate. Tasting, if you are given a chocolate bar, let's me grab a chocolate bar. What most people would do, and I've spent the last 16 years of my life giving people chocolate bars and getting them to taste. I dare say that many of you there will have seen me elsewhere and may have heard this talk before, but it's worth listening to again. Unfortunately, you're not going to get some chocolate with me this time, but when the sun shines again, you will, I'm sure. We'll do that. But most people you can see, even holding that here, most of you will know that's a Divine chocolate bar, but the most important thing, you know it's a chocolate bar. Even though you can't read the writing, you don't know where it comes from, you don't know who grew it, any of that information. So what I would say to people is use all 5 senses. We're going to look at it, touch it, listen to it, smell it, and then taste it in that order. And you've got to do it in that order because you can't taste it at the beginning. Most people open it, break a piece off, put it into the mouth, crunch it twice and swallow it. If that's how you eat chocolate, all you'll get is energy. You'll get fats, calories. If you want to taste it, then we need to go through this system. When we look at taste or our senses relating to taste, our mouths only make up 5% of the experience of flavour. Our ears make up 20%. Our eyes are 20% or up to 20%, but our eyes occupy half our brain being visual, so the eyes bully the other senses. If you see something, you're more likely to taste it like you've seen it rather than like it actually is, if that makes sense.
David, we've got another question. Why do we add sugar to the chocolate?
You don't need to. If you don't, it extends the shelf life. So if you want it to last more than 2 days, then the things that inhibit water activity, which is a posh way of saying mold, really, is sugar or alcohol. What you can do on some recipes is put a knob of butter in, and that will extend again because you've added more fat. But those things, because people look and think, well, water, there's nothing to go off in there. It will go mouldy because of water activity. So that's why it's in, and it just, but yeah, leave it out. Often, depending what I'm doing, if you're going to dip it into tempered chocolate, there's enough sugar in there. It'll be fine. But I've used dark chocolate, 75% from Haigh, so it's a quite a bitter chocolate, a robust chocolate. So I thought to put some sugar in, but by all means, miss it out. But think about the poor fair trade sugar farmer who the sugar came from as well. I keep talking to my friends in church who give up chocolate for Lent and saying, don't. What does the cocoa farmer do for a month while you're not eating chocolate? Maybe take up eating really good ethical chocolate for a month, and then hopefully you'll carry that on for the rest of the year.
Yeah, that's
anyway.
one of the programs that, well, the campaigns that we've had going over the last couple of years with Fairtrade Yorkshire. Sort of don't give up on fair trade in Lent, because we do. Lots of us campaigners have events all through Fairtrade Fortnight, and it's always Ash Wednesday there or thereabouts, and people do give up chocolate. And actually, yeah, but making a pledge to switch to only eating Fairtrade chocolate in Lent is actually a really good way of doing it, because you're supporting the farmers and workers. It's good for them, it's good for you. But also it means that if somebody offers you some chocolate and it's not Fairtrade, you can start a conversation about why you won't eat it, because you've not given up chocolate, you've given up unfair chocolate, and then you can start having that conversation about why Fairtrade's better.
Exactly. So yeah, I would do that. So we've got our eyes at 20%, but bullying the other sensors, and then we have our nose, which is between 70 and 90% of the experience. And if people eat it the normal way, they're never smelling it. They're just that they'll pick it up, they might look at it to see whether it's milk white or dark, it's into the mouth, crunched twice and swallowed. So doing it this way, you'll at least get the biggest opportunity to get the most out of your chocolate as you do that. So the first thing we're going to do, I hope you've all saved some chocolate so you can do that. I'm going to assume that you know where it's from because it's your chocolates. And hopefully if you didn't read the wrapper and it's still around, please do. But
before you go on, David, got another couple of questions.
Yeah, sure.
Somebody else wants you to repeat how much liquid. I know you said before, but how much?
150 mils.
150 ml of liquid. Perfect. I should type that into the chat box. And somebody else Bruce is saying, if you use an oil base, such as olive oil, instead of a water base, does that mean it's no longer a ganache?
No, it is a ganache, Bruce. The problem is olive oil is often a strong flavour. So if you want to introduce oil, I would go for a sunflower or a rapeseed, a really light oil. If you like nuts and you're not, you haven't got allergies, hazelnut oil is really good. I've just done a recipe card, which he says it's not there actually, for a chocolate spread that doesn't have palm oil in it, if I can be as polite as that. And I use hazelnut oil in there rather than bashing up hazelnuts, or you can miss the oil out completely. And again, if people want that recipe, I'll make sure I give you that, Joanne. So you've got Joanna, sorry. So you've got that. Any others? No. So when we look at our chocolate bar, this is from Ghana. It's Divine Chocolates, owned by a cooperative, or part owned by a cooperative, Kwapa Cocoa, who I've been to visit a couple of times. And there's 80,000, it changes, so that's why I've done odd. 80,000 cocoa farmers owning over 20% of the business now. So they not only get to share in the fair trade premium, they also get to share in the dividend of Divine Chocolate Limited. So that's a really good thing to do. They're almost getting fair trade plus. In many respects, so and we think that's good. So we'll look at the back, we'll check whether we've got allergies, we'll check whether we've got religious observances to make. This is kosher and halal. There's the kosher D mark on there, so that's obviously, it's got milk in it, so it's not vegetarian, also not vegan, sorry, but we can move. If you're using dark products, then you'll find they're vegan friendly. When I was at Divine, we had a conversation with the Vegan Society about may contain traces of milk. And they said, we're really comfortable that your product's vegan. So they were really good. And then, so we've taken the wrapper off. When you're doing something with Divine, it's always interesting to read the story that's inside there. That'll tell you a little bit about the Adinkra symbols that are really, really interesting. You might notice, if you've met anybody else from Divine, all the business cards used to have an Adinkra symbol that represented their character, because the symbols all had something that would be representative. Mine was the Siamese crocodiles, by the way, just in case. So read that, and then we're going to open and look at the chocolate. What we should find when we look inside our chocolate is smooth and shiny chocolate. Sometimes you may have bought chocolate when you perfect, try and keep it, you don't smell it yet. when we try and buy chocolate, sometimes you open it and it's got grey or white streaks across the top of the chocolate. That's called a bloom, and there are two different types of bloom. there's a sugar bloom and a fat bloom. Often you end up with both at the same time. But a fat bloom is if you left the chocolate bar on the windowsill, or if it was in a petrol station and it was near the window, or you left it in your car overnight and then the sun came up, the chocolate would start to melt, because chocolate starts to melt at 25 degrees and is fully liquid at 36. So as the chocolate recedes, the sugar that's in there, because sugar is the second largest ingredient in chocolate, the sugar melts at 180 degrees, so that just pokes out of the top. Doesn't crystallize because it's already crystallized, but the chocolate leaves it and it comes out. Usually with a melted bar of chocolate, we'll put it in the fridge so it will set again, and then we'll carry on and eat it, unless we're really desperate and we want to just suck it out the wrapper, but most of us can wait.
The question is saying, is this the case even if it's 80% cocoa?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the cocoa butter that's melting. Cocoa butter is the only naturally occurring fat that's liquid at body temperature. There are no others. There might be liquid before body temperature or way above, but there's none. It's the only one that's naturally occurring that does that, which is why it goes in cosmetics. So you put it into the fridge. When you put the chocolate bar in the fridge, the cold from the fridge shocks the chocolate, and the cocoa butter leaches out and comes to the surface, and you get a slimy layer on top of the chocolate. So some people keep the chocolate in the fridge. The official line is you shouldn't, saying that I'm not the chocolate police, you've paid for it, you eat it how you want. But you'll get more flavour from it if you eat it at room temperature. Our taste buds, when you put something in your mouth, if it's cold, they shrink. And because they're only making up 5% of the experience anyway, you want them to expand, not to shrink, really. So give them the best chance you can, is what I would say. But when you...
And just one more question. Somebody's saying, can they use invert sugar syrup?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It can almost be any type of the sugars. You can... Invert's really good for shelf life. And it goes in a lot of confectionery products for that reason. So when you've got a slimy layer of cocoa butter on your chocolate in the fridge, and then the sugar crystals that are poking out, we'll all know that sugar is hygroscopic. It loves moisture, it loves water. If you make a cup of tea, put sugar in, stir it, and put the spoon back in the sugar bowl, you get to see just how much sugar loves water, because the spoon is covered in sugar. In your fridge, all the moisture smells of mixed curry, the piece of onion that wasn't wrapped up properly, and all those aromas get drawn to the sugar, and make your chocolate bar taste of those other things in your fridge. So if you need to put your chocolate in the fridge, cover it, put it in a Tupperware container or something like that, or cover it in cling film, but make sure it doesn't get all those smells. So we've looked at it. The second thing we're going to do is touch it. So if you run your finger across the top, it should be smooth and dry. You shouldn't feel the cocoa butter we talked about. And you also shouldn't be able to feel sugar crystals, which would feel a little bit like sand or salt if they were present, but you'd see them. There might be something that would look a bit like mold circles. It's almost impossible to make chocolate mold. Some of it, dark chocolate lasts for 5 years. And I couldn't say that when I worked for Divine, because you have to put 2 years on it, but it will be all right for up to 5, and you would retemper if it had got a problem and you'd be fine. So have a look at your chocolate and it should be nice. And then the final thing you're going to do is rub hard on the corner and try and get the chocolate to melt on your finger. And that will tell you that it's got real cocoa butter in, because chocolate melts at 25 degrees and you're 36.2. So if you can manage to melt it a little bit with your fingers, and then you can lick your fingers rather than wipe it on your clothes, that tells you that's a quality sign. If it doesn't melt, it might tell you that it's got palm oil or one of the other modified fats that lots of confectionery companies use today, sadly. So we've looked at it, we've touched it. The next thing is to listen to it. So you're going to lift it up to your ear, and have a listen. And this is usually when if I was there with you, I would say, what's it saying to you? And we know what it's saying, don't we, John? It's saying, eat me. And then if you just take the chocolate and break it, hopefully you hear that snap. That's telling you that the polymorphic crystals in chocolate have been bound together, and then you've snapped and physically broken them. And if you look at the edge of your chocolate, you can sometimes see the layers, a little bit like you could with rock, because it's been layered in such a way. There are 5 different polymorphic crystals in chocolate, and when a chocolatier or chef wants to temper chocolate, we only want one of those, which is the beta 5 crystal, and that's the one that we're trying to heat up and cool down, that magic crystal that will make it shiny, snap and set hard, so it will shrink out of the mold. But say, if people want those instructions, I'll make sure you've got them for afterwards anyway, so you can do that. So we've looked, touched, listened. The next one is smell. There's 1,500 aromas in chocolate. This is showing you some of them. I'll get as close as I can there. And can you, is that anything like?
Yeah, so we can see we've got caramelized nuts, spices, herbs, fruit.
Exactly. And it goes in earthy, vegetal, roasted dairy, those sorts of things. And that will give you, it's not a perfect way of tasting because it's quite subjective, because it suggests things. And then, but it will, if you taste the bars, because you've all got different bars in front of you, then if it was a milk bar, hopefully you'll taste dairy, but you may also get a caramel note, because often the Cadbury's bar has got caramelized milk powder in it, which is why they get, how they get their signature taste. So that will make you think of caramelized things, and this would give you a little indication. You'd look, but if you thought there's something woody in there, often Ghanaian cocoa has a note of oak in it, and most people say, well, I don't know what oak tastes like, but you know what it smells like. But we used to pine, we used to smells of sandalwood and cedarwood when we go to the gym or when we go to the sauna. We do know a lot more about wood than we think we know. And once you break it down, you think, oh yeah, I get that. And it's like that with many things, but most of us don't practice smelling things. I've got an aroma kit that I take when I'm doing my presentations, and I'll hand the bottle around and cover the label up and say, what's that? And 99% of the people present will get it wrong. And the first one I always use, which I'm going to have to change after this talk, is apple. It's a green apple. And people can't tell it's a green apple. And then when you tell them it's a green apple, they say, oh yeah, and they know. But everybody would have bet you money that they knew what a green apple smelled like. And we don't, because we look at it and say, that's a green apple. So put your chocolate into your cupped hand, lift it up to your nose and have a really good smell, and think of the first thing you'll get, hopefully, is chocolate. If it's flavoured, you might pick up those flavours. If you need to rub it slightly to help it melt, I don't know how warm the room is you're in, so think about that. Then do that and have a little smell, and hopefully you'll get more than just it smells of chocolate, or it smells, mine's of milk and orange, it just smells of milk or orange. And do that. There's a lot of truth in the nose blind thing. If you've got, I used to say to children, if you're a stinky brother or sister who don't change the trainers enough, you go into the room, they take the trainers off and you smell the stinky feet. And then if you stay in the room, eventually you don't notice it anymore. If you leave the room and then come back, all of a sudden you notice the smell again. And that's because our nose, as a safety thing, stops sampling after about 7 to 10 seconds, and then it'll have another go a little bit later. So when you smell chocolate or food, do that for 7 seconds, stop, think about what it's doing, wait another 10, 15 seconds, and then have another smell. Otherwise, if you do too much, your nose will stop paying attention and you won't get the things. The final bit we're going to do before everybody puts it in the mouth, and this is usually if we're in a room together, I'm saying stop, put that down. You're going to pinch your nose, break a piece of chocolate big enough that you want to put in your mouth. Because if you've had a big bar and it's in 2 pieces, you get to squeeze the whole thing in. And then you're going to take 1 square, put it onto your tongue, and then close your mouth. So you like that. And you move your tongue around a little on the roof of your mouth, because chocolate starts to melt at 25 degrees. So you get your mouth closed and it should start melting. Now release your nose. Open your mouth just a tiny bit and gently breathe in. And this is called cooking, C-U-C-K. And it should go from sweet to a burst of flavour. When we put things in our mouths can only taste 5 things. So as well as only being 5%, it can do sweet, sour, bitter, and umami. That's all it can do with those 5 things. Of that piece of chocolate that you put in your mouth, there's a little bit of umami in dark chocolate and the sugar. So and it'll get bitter. So it'll get, there's 3 things your mouth could detect. Once you give your nose a chance to help, then the 150 aromas, sorry, 1500 aromas come into play. So it should have burst into flavour, and you should hopefully still taste it now. If it just came in and you got a flavour hit and then it disappeared, a little bit like cheap chewing gum, your brain would say, give me some more. And it's really demanding sugar, it's demanding energy. If it's satisfying, like what I hope the piece you've got in your mouth is now, and you've still got a flavour lingering after 2 or 3 minutes, your brain won't demand more chocolate. So you'll eat less chocolate, but enjoy it more and get more from it. And then you would review all the stuff and you'd say, where did it come from? What was it like? What were its ethics? What was its religion? You know, did I enjoy it? Did the flavour come in fast and hard? And you can do all those more flowery things that you would see with wine tasters or coffee tasters. But this is a really, really good thing to do, to have an evening session with your friends, and you can go to the Co-op and buy 5-6 bars of chocolate, or go, you know, buy some from Trade Craft, whatever, but buy a selection of really good chocolates, sit down and do this, and teach your friends how to enjoy. We like to do cheese and wine evenings. We like, you could with beer, I pair it with gin, I do evenings with that, I do it with whiskey, I do beer and chocolate pairings. You know, there's lots and lots of things, and it's a really, really cost effective but a great way of introducing fair trade chocolate to people, because some of our friends don't think it's good. And 20 years ago, when it first started, fair trade coffee was really hard to drink. And I think there's a lot of saints out there, fair trade saints, who battled on through it. I'm not sure if I'd have had the resilience they had, but fair trade chocolate's really, really good. Fair trade coffee now is really, really good as well. So I think, you know, from that angle, they've done well. So that's chocolate tasting. I'll stop and answer a few more questions if that's sensible now, because we've still got.
So the next question that we had was Vicky was really surprised when you said rather naughtily that we've got a 5-year shelf life for dark chocolate, and she's wondering, how are we confident that there is no deterioration in taste, texture or ingredients if we have the unimaginable discipline to keep it that long? Now, I can't imagine other than the fact that I sell chocolate, so I do have quite a lot of it at home all the time. Yeah, it does take quite a lot of discipline to keep it for 5 years at least. So yeah, other than by sort of opening it up and tasting it, how do we know that it's not deteriorating?
Well, what you would look at, you do this test to be fair. I mean, I could go to my store now and bring out a 7-year-old piece of chocolate that I know would be absolutely fine. When milk chocolate will go off sooner, so you'll notice I said dark, because the milk powder, the fat in the milk powder will go rancid. So you may notice that milk always has a shorter shelf life than dark. And if it's got fruit and nut in, the fruit and nut will go off before the chocolate does. So other ingredients are the biggest problem, but you'd still do this sensory test. the 2-year shelf life. We know that they're still eating baked beans from the Second World War, and they're okay because the canning process was good enough. However, all baked beans have a 2-year shelf life on them. So, and that's great. It's a safety thing. But if it's your chocolate and you know how you've dealt with it and handled it at home, I wouldn't go out and buy 5-year-old chocolate. If that is a proper answer to the question. But I would retemper quite happily if something was out of temper, but I would taste it, smell it. When dark chocolate has gone, you get a horrible acidic sour smell that is absolutely unmistakable. You would not mix it up for anything else.
Indeed. Yes, I quite like Marco Antonio's put a point saying that long-lasting chocolate is like Star Wars. We have to embrace the dark side.
Absolutely.
So Bruce is saying, does dark chocolates ever go off? Can it always be retempered no matter how long it's been left?
Probably is the answer, but you would need to do the century. I had some 7-year-old, because that's why I said I knew I could go and get a piece yesterday, that had some issues in them. It was almost like a spot in the middle that looked like it was a mold growth. And I know because of the science that's almost impossible, and I chose to throw that away. So I would always look and inspect, and that was 7 years. So there are people that talk about it being much, much older. I've heard people, talking about 20-year-old. So I don't know, Bruce, but I think probably. But I would always want to do the century check.
Excellent. So what's the most expensive chocolate you've ever tasted? Was it ethical, and where can we buy it? That's from Steve.
Well, the quick answer is no, it wasn't ethical. The one that's famously wheeled out is Tokai, Toki, and it's a square bar that's probably about that size. So a 40-gram bar, half the size of a Divine bar, and there's a hole in the centre with a cocoa there, and it comes with a set of tongs, so you don't touch it, and you pick the tongs up, and in the Spanish elm box that it arrives in, there's a map with the geo coordinates telling you exactly where it came from within a yard, square meter, and that's $345 for 40 grams of chocolate. I think it's Emperor's New Clothes personally. I judge in the International Chocolate Awards. I judge for the Academy of Chocolate Awards. I do some stuff for the Great Taste Awards. I've tasted it a few times. It's good chocolate, but would I say it was worth 10 or 20 times more than everybody else's? No, I don't think so. Some of the other good stuff is things like Grenada chocolate. The chocolate you'll get from Bruce at Fig Tree is really, really good, because we know how that's been handled. We know the process. 20 years ago, if you went out to Amsterdam from Hull on the North Sea ferries, you would see a huge piles of Hessian or jute sacks with what looked like snow on top of them piled up. And you think, what are those? And having done some work for P&O Ferries, I got to ask that question, and it was cocoa with mould on top, and they just knocked the mould off. And I don't know where they're going. There's several places they could have gone, because Cargill have got a place in Hull. York, Roundtrees were having stuff coming in that way. So I wouldn't blame any one of those, because it was going other places as well. But nobody cared, because it didn't matter. They'd take it, blend it, throw some vanilla. Vanilla is a bit like a kryptonite for stinky stuff. You put it in, add some sugar, and everything tastes lovely. That's why tapioca and milk pudding and all had vanilla in there, as it makes ordinary food taste nice.
Yes, so it's like a blanket. Yeah, I'm the chocolate I'm tasting today. That's Bruce's Fig Tree dark chocolate. So I can confirm it is very good indeed. So right, I think we should have a prize question now. So if I can ask David to set a question, if you put your answers in the chat box, and I'll pick 3 and send you out a prize.
Right, we'll ask a difficult one to start with. What's the name of the crystal that chocolatiers want? The magic crystal. It's polymorphic, and there are 5 different ones. We can see that some people were paying attention because I'm seeing things coming up, so that's good. Great. So if people want to go and check their ganache in the fridge, but if not, you can leave it there and I'll show you with the one I did earlier, just so you've got the principle of what we're doing. So this is my ganache in a container, and you can either use a teaspoon or you can get one of these lovely little potato ice cream scoops that does it, or you can tip them out when it's set and cut them into squares using a knife. Some people cut them with cheese wires so you can have beautiful squares. If you're going to do that, then clean the cheese wire between every cut, otherwise it will drag all your chocolate off again. And the easiest thing we're going to do is we're going to mold these using our fingertips, because again, chocolate starts to melt at 25. If you use the palms of your hands, very, very quickly, it'll start to melt and it'll become a slimy mess. That's not the end of the world, because it's chocolate, so it is going to be messy. But when you take a teaspoon, take one out, use your fingertips because they're the coolest, make a rough circle, and then drop it into the cocoa powder. I've made a cocoa bath. It's a bacon storage unit that you buy from B&M Bargains for 90 pence or a pound, whatever, and you throw that in there, and then I'm going to bring that to the camera, and there you have a hand rolled truffle. If the cocoa powder is a little bit too bitter for you, then you can add some icing sugar into there, just so it's not quite as bitter. But again, somebody said did we have to add sugar? So the answer is no, you don't have to. If you wanted to roll some of them in desiccated coconuts, you could. If you wanted to do some toasted nuts, that works fine, because your fingers are going to slightly melt the chocolate on the outside as you're molding that round shape. So you then drop them into the bath of whatever you've got, shake them around, and you can either leave them in there or pick them out with a fork. I've got a fancy chocolate fork, but you can just pick them out like that, put them on a tray, and they can go back in the fridge. If you wanted to, you can put them in the freezer, and they'll last for up to 3 months in the freezer, and you can bring them out half a dozen or a dozen at a time. The recipe I've given you will make about 50 truffles, so you will have quite a few. I think what a really nice thing to do is to go to an Oxfam shop or a second-hand shop, buy a couple of teacup and saucers, and then put half a dozen truffles in there, maybe flavoured with things your friend or loved one likes. Wrap it up with a ribbon and then give them that as a gift. And that's a nice gift. You've recycled a cup and saucer, you've used some ethical chocolate, you've thought about the person because you've given them their flavour and things they like. And I think that's a nice way to do that. And this is great to do with kids, because kids can do this and get messy as well. And you might even get kids eating dark chocolate this way.
So we've had another question.
Yeah.
And it's basically, I'm not sure whether you're in a position to answer this. It might be something that we need to refer to the Fairtrade Foundation. Saying, what proportion of the current UK market do we think is fair trade now? And is modern enslavement still a feature of unfair chocolate harvesting and processing? Now, we know that it definitely is, particularly with child labour. There's about 1.5 million child labourers working in cocoa in West Africa, and that's particularly bad, and the conditions are truly appalling. Yeah, I know only about 5% of chocolate, of cocoa globally is Fairtrade certified, and I think it's I suspect it's not far off that for the UK, maybe slightly higher. Do you have any?
No, I think your numbers are about right. It is really, really low, and that's why we need to try. It's like if you look at craft chocolate now. There's with coffee and beer, there was what's called a third wave. So we got coffee and beer, and then it sort of became ordinary and drab and processed, and then we got baristas and steampunk guys and beardy hipsters that took coffee and they made it special, and they did some of it was nonsense, but some of it they improved and lifted the quality. And they've done the same with beer, starting in New York, and we've now got, over 300 microbreweries, in the country. It's happening with chocolate. So people like Bruce and Duffy and Cleethorpes, and there are lots of others that are making chocolate, taking beans and doing it from home, because it's the sort of thing you can do. With some application, it's not quite as straightforward as it first appears, but you can. And the quality has had to increase, because, if you look at the first year we did the International Chocolate Awards, there was about 50 bars entered. Last year, there'd have been nearly 3,000 bars entered. And not all of those are brilliant, but most of them are really, really good. And you're then splitting hairs to say who's winning, because there's only one winner in each category. You don't give everybody a medal because the chocolate's good. So quality has improved, and that's lifted fair trade with it, because typically people who are making fair trade chocolate are smaller manufacturers who can turn on a sixpence, who can change quite quickly and adapt to trends and flavours and styles.
That's one of the things. Marco Antonio, thank you, has obviously done some Googling for us. And he's saying that 12% of UK chocolate is fair trade, according to the Fairtrade Foundation, which that sounds about right. But I know there's companies like Aldi and Lidl are really expanding what the Fairtrade cocoa sourcing. So what it doesn't have is the Fairtrade mark, like this one that's in the corner of my screen.
It's on the back.
Yeah, so some of them do, but an awful lot of Lidl and Aldi chocolate now has got the white mark rather than the fully fair trade mark. And so what that means is that the sugar isn't fairly traded and the other ingredients, but the cocoa that's in there is. So the sort of entrenched problems that we have within the cocoa industry are being tackled by those sort of fair trade sourcing programs that are fair trade, rather than like a Cocoa Life or whatever that you get with other people's their own certifications. So fair trade is definitely becoming more and more of a thing. Just in the last 12 months, I've noticed this in those German owned supermarkets. So hopefully that 12% is growing, and I'm sure it will be after this.
Yeah. So if people carry on making their truffles the way, if they want to dip them in tempered chocolate, then I'll give the instructions separately, but that will be a whole new class, so we won't do that this afternoon. But feel free to download that. It takes a bit of paying attention, but it's not onerous. But Bruce might tell you different. But Bruce has clearly perfected tempering chocolate, because you've got that lovely bar in front of you.
Indeed. We've got another couple of questions about the truffles. So somebody's asking, Catherine's asking, what's the best way to add coffee flavour to truffles? Is it ground coffee, brewed espresso, or something else entirely?
Well, chocolate doesn't like water being added, so ideally you'd be adding a an oil-based thing. So you could, if I was going to do it, I'd probably put an espresso powder, an instant one in. You could put coffee grounds on the back of your chocolate bar. So once you've got the ganache, you could pour some spent coffee in there, stir it through, and that will give you a coffee aroma through your truffle. It depends if you like that texture, because you'll get a texture from that or not. But you can buy essences that are oil-based as well, that are ethical. So you should get some from in the bar range. There's quite a few companies doing that now.
And Debbie's asking, if you're making the truffles as gifts, do they still need to be kept in the fridge?
It's easier. It depends. If you've put the sugar that I've suggested, if you've then added some alcohol, you'll get about 21 days life. But if you're going to give them, I usually say to people, the shelf life of these is about 20 minutes. So if you're going to give them to somebody or take them to a dinner party, you don't want them going on the shelf and them eating them a month later, because you're asking for trouble. They're a fresh product. They need to be eaten in that way, because you've not put potassium sorbate, you've not done all the things that big companies do to give you a 9-month shelf life. You've not done any of that.
I've asked Bruce to come in because Gillian's asking a question: where can we buy Bruce's fig tree chocolate?
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we make such small amounts. I'm actually in the process of moving house at the moment, and I made my last batch yesterday for some time. But the main place people sell it, you can buy it from me directly. Joanna has been selling it very kindly online in her shop, but we're not doing that at the moment. The main place is in Lancaster, a place called Single Step Cooperative. So I don't know where they're from, but that's the main place that sells our chocolate, and they're going to take another delivery this Saturday. But it's such small amounts.
Exclusive.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Bruce. So back to David, we've got another question. Can we use liqueur cream like Bailey's when we're making the truffles?
Absolutely. You wouldn't want to make it all of that, because it would be too strong, I would suggest. You might want to put a couple of measures into. But if you were doing that, then you wouldn't need to use Bailey's. You could just add some whiskey to your cream, to your ganache. If you put it in the cream will split. So if you just put spirit in cream, it splits. If you get halfway through making your ganache through the stirring and put it in a little at a time there and incorporate it, you'll get it to go in. If you do that and it splits because you put it in a bit too quick, then give it a really good beating with a whisk and it should come back. But it will split like mayonnaise does, but you can get it back. If you've got a stick blender, then put that on, and that will absolutely force anything back together. So you can rescue it.
Now, somebody's obviously is it making along, I suppose is the best way to describe it. And they're saying that the ganache is still soft. So should they wait or put more chocolate in?
Wait, don't put more chocolate in, because you need it to melt, so it's cooling down now. If you really were desperate to finish it, you could put it into a piping bag, pipe rounds, little lumps, and then put the tray in the freezer. And that will allow it to freeze for about 10 minutes. They'll be set, and then just drop them into your cocoa powder like that, because you've already formed the shape. But if you can wait, then we're not talking a huge amount of time, and nobody will pinch you while you're waiting. So it's not painful. But if you're desperate to do it now, piping bag or a teaspoon and just blob it in a teaspoon to 2 teaspoons and just drop them into your cocoa powder, and then you'll be able to pick it up while it's in the cocoa powder.
Right, I think we're out of questions at the moment. So
Perfect. Or shall I ask a question, then another one?
Yeah. Let's have a second question. We've got 2 winners for that one, so let's have a second, and we'll find another winner.
Yeah, I mentioned that I last year went to Sao Tome, and I went out there with Joanne Harris, who wrote Xocolat. Who can tell me where Sao Tome is and what the name of the island is? Sao Tome and Principe. There's 2 little islands there, for the second smallest country, and they're in a specific place, and they had a name, a specific name that's topical.
Ruth's asking what's in the bottles on display on your table.
This one, the little one here.
I think it's the ones in your box.
Oh, sorry, here, yeah.
Jars, yeah.
The jars, sorry, yeah. This is the process. I've got cocoa beans, and then I've got the shells, so we husk them and winnow. Then cocoa nibs in the next one, and then they get ground to create cocoa liquor, which is exactly the process you get in with Bruce's stuff. And if you industrial process, you separate out cocoa butter from cocoa liquor, and you add it back in a later stage. Bruce is probably, and he'll tell you, adding a little bit of extra cocoa butter into his as well. And then you would add sugar, depending what you're making. The industrial process, they'll add a little bit of sunflower lecithin, which is an emulsifier, and then the milk powder if you're making milk chocolate. And the waste product from all that is cocoa powder, or it's called cake in the industry, and that's just cocoa powder. So when I was in Sao Tome, I was teaching people how to make cocoa powder from that, because they were buying and importing drinking chocolate, which seemed absolutely crazy because there was cocoa everywhere, and they were buying internationally cocoa powder from Nestle or Nesquik. Yeah, so I taught them how to make it, so they didn't need to, which was much better.
Excellent. So we've had a few people entering the competition. Can you tell me what the answer is, and then I can?
Yeah, the answer for that is they're in the Bay of Guinea, which is off the coast of West Africa. So it depends how good your answers are to whether you accept West Africa, but it's off the coast of West Africa. And the islands were called the Chocolate Islands. 85% of all the cocoa in the world came from there. These are the 2 islands that Cadbury bought most of his supply from. And he switched in the early 1900s when he realised there was slavery involved on these islands, and he moved it to Ghana. So the move to mainland Africa was very, very instrumental in these 2 little islands and Cadbury. There's some lovely Titicaca stories about how it got there, and Dutch missionaries, but the real bread and butter was Cadbury moved his supply because he wanted an ethical supply chain. There's a really interesting book to read called The Chocolate Islands, and it's all about Cadbury's and a guy called Bert, who he sent off to investigate his supply chain. And he went to Angola, Mozambique, South Africa, because that was the length of the supply chain and the workers. And Cadbury put a huge amount of effort in finding that, which lots of other companies didn't. They pretended, they didn't know where it came from. So there was some good stuff in there, some terrible stories as well, unfortunately, because it was the times you were at, but worth finding and reading.
Excellent. No, that's great. Fantastic. Somebody asked a question about whether, let me just get the exact wording of it. Is it better to use cocoa butter in truffles than oil, or better than oil? So is cocoa butter better than oil in truffles?
It depends on what texture you want, because the classic thing is to add a knob of butter and you'd soften the butter. You wouldn't melt it, you'd soften it, and then add softened butter to your ganache. If you melt it, it will make it really waxy and horrible and sticky. Because don't forget, you're trying to make an emulsion, which you want the two to be together as an emulsion. And it's, if you remember the soap experiment at school with water-loving heads and water hate, it's that sort of science you're trying to create. So, yeah, add some butter. You know, some people, quite a few people would add butter to drinking chocolate, and that will make it soft and smooth and easier to drink. You know, you might remember the Sunny Delight saga, which was vegetable oil added to fruit juice to make it easier for children to drink. Not that I'm advocating that, but, you know, the texture it creates is a pleasurable texture for us, for humans.
Yeah, is it right that it melts at body temperature? Chocolate, basically, we like it so much because it melts at body temperature.
Yeah, yeah. Cocoa butter, only naturally occurring fat that does. So that's why it's sensual. Yeah,
so basically I keep telling people that human beings are designed to eat cocoa chocolate.
Absolutely. You know, and we're still finding out stuff. I mean, I'm doing some, I've been asked to join a board of a nutrigenics board, and they're looking at flavonoid extracts for medical use and all sorts of other things. So it will never get to chocolate the way they want to look at stuff. I've got a lot of reading to do before I can tell you much about it, really, or recommend or not. But I've been asked and I'm looking at. So yeah, there's lots and lots of things. You can get medical uses of chocolate. There's a great Victorian book that will tell you all about that. And there's some horror stories and some really interesting stuff as well.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, so it looks like we're out of questions. Do we have anything else that we need to cover?
Not for me.
Nope. Excellent. Right, so I've got some winners. I've contacted you and I've got your addresses, so all your prizes will be going out. So I think it just remains for us to say thank you to David for this amazing workshop. And hopefully we'll all go away and well, obviously continue to taste the chocolate that you tasted earlier, if there's any of it left, which I suspect there won't be. But then also go away, make some truffles, and make sure that you use Fairtrade cocoa. And obviously we're coming to the end, but Fairtrade Fortnight hasn't finished yet, and there's lots of other events that you can still book into over the weekend from tomorrow right through till Sunday, and even it's International Women's Day on Monday, and there's 1 or 2 events going on then as well, so if you can keep an eye out for those. Thanks very much for coming, and just to wrap us up, I'm going to show you a video of some ladies who grow cocoa in Cote d'Ivoire, which, as we've established, is one of the places where cocoa is most commonly grown.
Ici, il y a des familles qui ne sont pas prêtes aussi à donner la forêt aux femmes. Parce qu'ils disent que la femme doit se marier, aller travailler avec son mari là-bas. Quand tu travailles pour ton mari, le champ est fait avec le monsieur. Mais à la fin de l'année, on n'a rien. On n'a rien. Avec ton propre champ, tu peux t'épanouir, tu peux être autonome.
Mon cacao, c'est mon champ à moi. C'est pas pour mon mari, c'est pour moi.
Je vois que Fairtrade nous aide beaucoup dans la cacaoculture. Moi, par exemple, moi, en tant que secrétaire SG des femmes, je compte faire une maison. Même si c'est 2 chambres salon, c'est mon souhait. Nous, on veut chacune d'entre nous avoir notre liberté, avoir nous-mêmes nos propres maisons. Nous construire des grosses maisons et puis dormir dedans à l'aise avec nos maris et nos enfants.
So thank you very much. Good to see everybody. I hope you enjoyed that film. And I was lucky enough last year to meet Rosina, one of the ladies that was on that film. She came to York and spoke to us about her life. It was really inspiring. So I'm hoping that after all the events that we've had this Fairtrade Fortnight, that you can go away inspired and full of stories about how to improve the lives of the farmers and workers around the world that we all rely on. Thanks very much, and go and enjoy your chocolate.